What is up, everyone? Aeneas here. Today we're back with the top 5 new brews for the MTG Phyrexia All Will Be One set, or MTG1. Today we are talking about a deck, Boros Atraxa. So this is making use of one of the new cards that I feel is very powerful coming out in the new set, and kind of leaning into a shell that has got started in the last meta in the Brothers War standard. So we're leaning into that Boros shell that was already there and having some new cards and new changes to that. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's take a look at the new brew that we got going on here. So here is the namesake card, Atraxa Grand Unifier. We can make that a little bit bigger. So Atraxa is a giant creature, 3 green, white, blue, and black for a 7/7 flying vigilance death touch lifelink. So 7 mana for a 7/7 with a bunch of abilities. And when it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 10 cards of your library, and for each card type, you put one of those revealed into your hand. The rest go on the bottom of your library in a random order. So you want to have different card types, but you want to be able to consistently get, at least 2 or 3 of these types in the top 10 cards of your deck. So that, basically whenever it comes to the battlefield, it's going to be like a 3-for-1 or a 4-for-1, something like that. So very powerful card, very good value engine. And in my last video, or 2 videos ago, I talked about how it's similar to this card, Niv Mizzet Reborn. Very powerful card, not as powerful in standard, but very powerful in historic and even some older formats, occasionally like Pioneer or something like that. But it does a very similar thing. Look at the top 10, and for each color pair, you choose a card that's exactly those pairs. So you get 1 card of each color pair. So yeah, again, a lot of times this would get you like 3 cards, 4 cards, something like that. So it was very strong. It's pretty hard to cast, so standard didn't have good enough fixing for it at the time. Standard also didn't really have good reanimation at the time as well, so it didn't work out super well in standard. It saw some play, some fringe play, but historic it was played a lot and very powerful there. So yeah, so we're trying the same thing with Atraxa, but a little bit different shell. Also in this deck, I put 1 Kaya Intangible Slayer because our reanimation works for this as well. And seems like a pretty solid planeswalker. It's 7 mana again, hexproof. It's +2 is that each opponent loses 3 life, and you gain 3 life. 0, you draw 2 cards, and -3, exile creature or enchantment, and you create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 1/1. So you remove something and you get a token copy. I guess in theory you could exile your own Atraxa if you really wanted to get another like hit off of the Atraxa on your deck, but I don't really see that happening. Most likely you want to exile your opponent's stuff and get value from their stuff. Anyway, just a pretty solid card, removal, draw, and a win con with the plus. So it's a nice include, a 1 of in the deck to also reanimate. The other thing we have to reanimate is Titan of Industry, just another solid creature that has a very good enter the battlefield effect. Destroy an artifact or enchantment, you gain 5 life, you create a rhino, you put a shield counter on a creature, and you get to pick 2 of those. So very solid. And we have Steel Seraphim here. This is another card that people had put in reanimator decks because it's an artifact. It's 3 mana to cast early, and then late game you can cast it for 6. It's a pretty good body, has some life gain, stuff like that. And if you reanimate it, you get the 6 mana version of the card. So it's okay to like discard it early or have it die early, and then you can reanimate it again later. So that's just another kind of segue card that is good in the late game as well. All right, and then the basis of the rest of the deck is we want to basically draw cards, discard the big stuff, and get to our reanimation spells and get them out of the graveyard. And we have to also make sure that we stay alive during all of that. That's crucial, staying alive. It's staying alive, staying alive. But yeah, sorry, the BGs just pop in my head when I think of this. Anyway, that's random. But so we've got sweepers to deal with all the aggro that's in the format. We got Brother's End. By far, I think the best sweeper right now in standard. However, you know, not a lot of good red decks right now besides mono red, so it doesn't see a lot of play. Depopulate, very fine sweeper, 4 mana. Farewell, the other really good sweeper in standard that is the only problem with is it's 6 mana, but exiling everything is pretty insane. Yeah, so anyway, we got one of them in there just so late game you can exile stuff, but we're kind of hoping that the Brotherhood's End will hold us out until we can get our big stuff onto the battlefield. And the other cool thing about Brotherhood's End is it hits planeswalkers, so you can kill the opponent's planeswalkers with it. So it's not dead even in like control matchups. It also hits artifacts with mana value 3 or less, and we know that there's going to be more artifacts in the new set. There was also like Bankbuster and things like that in the old set, so it's not dead on that side of things either. So yeah, it's definitely a pretty flexible card. Okay, and then our reanimation cards, we got Invoke Justice, we got Repair and Recharge. Mostly we're leaning on Invoke Justice. It's just the better version of the card. Return target permanent from their graveyard to the battlefield, then put 4 1/1 counters among any number of creatures or vehicles. So as long as we're reanimating a creature, then we get to put those counters on it. Also, if there's a few other ways we can get some random creatures on the battlefield, or if we have our 3 mana Steel Seraph down, we can put counters on that because it's already on the battlefield, make a really big one. So that's a plus, added plus, but mostly we want that reanimation, that sweet reanimation part of it. All right, so yeah, Repair and Recharge, a little bit more narrow. It only hits artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers. So we have Steel Seraph as artifact, Kaya as a planeswalker. We also have a Portal to Phyrexia down here that we can reanimate. And there are enchantments in the decks, so worst case scenario, you'll probably get one of these enchantments. So it's not the end of the world, but not ideal. Obviously, you want to get one of your artifacts or your planeswalker. Okay, so then I guess the spot removal, we got Lay Down Arms, and we got this new one, Ossification. I think this is pretty sweet, include, and you might even want more of this. The only stipulation is that you have to have basic lands. So as long as you have a basic land, you can play this card and you enchant it. And when it enters the battlefield, exile target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. So like a Banishing Light, but it's 2 mana, so that's even better. And then you have to have a basic land. So that's the big stipulation. Thankfully, in this deck, we run a lot of basic lands, and so we can meet this. So it should be fine to play this and pretty much always have on turn 2. And I think this is pretty nice because there wasn't a great 2 mana answer in white before that you could reliably use against like all the aggro decks that would not be dead against other decks. So I think, yeah, it's going to fill in a nice missing piece that we needed for things like Sheoldred, or getting rid of some of the soldier creatures that were a little bit harder to remove. And Lay Down Arms, while it's good and it hits most things, if you don't have enough planes, like maybe you have 1 or 2 planes and you needed 3 or 4, then you know, it feels bad when that happens. But we've tried to craft the mana base here so that it's not going to happen, but it still does happen every once in a while. It's just your draws. It's just luck of the draw, right? All right. So besides that, we got to have our discard cards, things that can discard these big creatures and planeswalkers and artifacts. So we've got Big Score, just a solid 4 mana, discard a card, draw 2 and create 2 treasures. So not only does it help you get your big thing in the graveyard, also ramps you into these Invoke Justice and Repair and Recharge. And let's say maybe your mana is a little bit off, having the 4 white pips that you need for Invoke Justice. This is a good way to smooth that out, help make sure you get to it. Yeah, and help you find cards if you're missing something, some piece. On top of that, uh, let's say you don't use the 2 treasures, then you might be able to just use it later to cast something like Kaya or cast Atraxa, or maybe even Titan of Industry. That one's a little bit harder because it's triple green, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities that you can cast these just on with 7 mana with the treasures. So yeah. Okay. Other than that, Bitter Reunion is a pretty solid discard that sticks around as an enchantment, which can give haste to a creature. So that's a pretty powerful sequence that people might overlook when you're playing games, where you can cast Atraxa with the reanimation spell. Maybe you have 6 mana with the treasures from Big Score. You cast Invoke Justice, you get your Atraxa with 4 counters on it, and it has Vigilance, Death Touch, and Lifelink, and Flying, and then you give it haste with the Bitter Reunion, swing in for 11 damage, and you get 11 lifelink. That's gonna definitely either win you the game or at least swing the game in your favor dramatically. Not to mention you get the 3 cards when it enters the battlefield. So that's what you're banking on, is like that big powerful swing to win you the game with this deck. And Bitter Reunion just is icing on the cake. Lets you discard, and it gives you that potential haste burst. So very, very sweet. We also have Fable of the Mirror Breaker, you know, OP card of standard. Just if you're playing red, you almost have to have it. It just does everything, and it's annoying. I feel bad playing it every time, but yeah, if you're playing red, you kind of have to have it. So that gives us treasure. It gives us some random creatures for Invoke Justice's counters. Yeah, you get the discard and draw, and you can copy your things. So late game, if you have one of these sitting around and you get a Atraxa down or you get a Titan down, you can copy it and you re-get the effect of it. So that part is really insane. If you ever get to do that, you're gonna win the game if you get to do that. So usually people will know that it's coming and they'll try to kill this Fable. And if they waste the removal on the Fable, then they're not gonna have it for your big things. So that's what you got to do. All right. And then the last one, Elder Dragon War. This one could be another Bitter Reunion, but I think it's nice to have the semi-sweeper, 2 damage to everything. Might help you against aggro. You can discard any number of cards. So if your hand is just trash or just all the big things, if you can get this down, you can just discard all of them, get a new hand. So that's pretty nice. And then the 4/4 creature is another creature that you can put counters onto. So that is also pretty nice. So all 3 of the modes are good. So I think it's worth including at least a 1 of in this deck. I think that's the main things to mention. We've got some decent land, and we've got Jetmir Garden. So we have a little bit of green to go with the Titan of Industry if we need to, or with Atraxa if we need to. And then lots of basic lands because, as I mentioned, ossification needs basic lands, and we have a lot of plains because Lay Down Arms needs plains to be good. So 14 plains with the Jetmir and 12 basics to go with ossification. So should be pretty solid there. You know, tweak it as you need it, but I was playing something similar to this before. Didn't have much issue with Lay Down Arms or really meeting my color requirements. So I think you should be fine, but yeah, we'll have to play and see a little bit if we need to tweak that. Anyway, that's the core concept of the deck. Pretty simple, pretty powerful, and it's just lots of fun, to be honest. If you haven't played a Reanimator deck before, it's really fun. I know it can be annoying to play against sometimes. Just, I guess it's like Control, kind of, where it's like, you know, you're trying to like mitigate the damage early and then have your big finisher. I think that's what I just love in Magic. It's just like the potential to swing the game. A lot of other card games like Hearthstone or things like that, as soon as you start losing, the game's over, right? Like you can't come back. But Magic is such a cool game because there is the potential to come back. There is strategies you could do where you give up your early game in order to have a better late game. And I just think that is so cool. Yeah. So anyway, let me know what you think about the deck. Is there anything else I should be reanimating instead, or maybe different colors you think would be better? I know black has some reanimation stuff, but just found that the white red shell seemed better because of the nice discard effects. And I know it was working well for me in Brothers War. So let me know what you think. But yeah, we'll be having the other 3 top 5 new brews coming up real soon. So keep watching for those. And please, yeah, share with me anything that you are excited for in the new set in the comments. I really want to hear it. I want to have ideas from you, things to try out, and we'll look forward to it. So till next time, have fun out there and see ya.